Imagine driving through the lonely deserts of Texas on a moonless night when suddenly glowing orbs of light appear in the distance. They dance, they flicker, they move with intelligence as if watching you. Some say they're spirits of the dead, others claim it's something not of this world. But one thing is certain, once you see the Marfa Lights, you are never the same again. The story begins in the 1800s, when early settlers and ranchers first reported seeing mysterious glowing orbs floating above the barren desert near the town of Marfa, Texas. Cowboys told tales of strange lights that chased their horses at night. Native tribes whispered that they were the souls of lost warriors wandering forever across the desert sands. By the early 1900s, people traveling through the desolate Texas desert claimed to see them too. Some described white glowing balls, others saw fiery red sparks, and a few swore the lights split into two, then vanished into the ground. What made it terrifying was their behavior. These lights didn't just float aimlessly. Witnesses said the orbs followed them, shifting direction with unnatural intelligence. When approached, they disappeared without a sound, only to reappear again further away. Even skeptics couldn't explain it. There were no roads, no cars, and no technology that could account for glowing, hovering orbs in the desert night, and yet the lights kept returning. Some nights they were harmless, distant glimmers. Other nights, they were so close that witnesses swore they could feel the heat on their skin. One rancher's diary from 1916 described it best. "They were watching me, not drifting, not floating, watching." As decades passed, the stories of the Marfa Lights grew darker. What was once considered a desert curiosity soon became a paranormal obsession. In the 1940s, a young couple was driving through the lonely highway near Marfa when they noticed a glowing orb hovering just above the desert floor. At first, they thought it was a lantern or another car, but as they slowed down, the light began to follow their vehicle. The girl later recalled in a trembling voice, "It wasn't just following us, it was circling us. Like it was curious, like it wanted something." Panicked, the couple sped through the desert road, yet the glowing sphere kept pace, darting effortlessly through the darkness. Only when they reached the edge of town did it vanish into thin air, leaving behind nothing but silence and the girl's uncontrollable sobs. But it wasn't just travelers. Ranchers began reporting missing cattle near the desert plains, where the lights appeared most frequently. Farmers claimed the lights descended low to the ground, glowing so brightly that it lit up their entire fields. One farmer swore he found his sheep huddled together in terror, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling, and just beyond them 2 glowing orbs hovered side by side watching. When he grabbed his rifle, they shot upward into the sky, gone in an instant. By the 1960s, paranormal investigators began flooding the town of Marfa. Some brought cameras, others brought scientific equipment. But no matter how advanced the technology, the lights refused to be captured. They would appear in places with no human presence. They would vanish the moment someone tried to approach. And worst of all, sometimes they appeared inside the town itself. One chilling night in 1967, a family claimed to see a glowing red orb floating outside their window. The father opened the door, thinking it was a prank. But when he stepped outside, the orb rushed toward him, stopping only feet away, illuminating his entire body in crimson light. His wife screamed from inside the house, but by the time she blinked, the orb had disappeared, and her husband was lying unconscious on the porch, burned on his arms as if he'd been too close to fire. By the 1970s, the Marfa Lights had turned into something the locals feared deeply. No longer just distant orbs flickering in the desert. The lights began approaching homes, chasing vehicles and terrifying entire families. One chilling account came from a truck driver named Daniel Ruiz. He was hauling cargo late at night along the highway near Marfa when he saw 2 glowing lights ahead of him. At first, he thought they were headlights, but as he drove closer, he realized they weren't attached to any vehicle at all. The 2 orbs hovered just above the road, bright and pulsing, almost alive. Daniel swerved to avoid them, but the lights darted after his truck, weaving in and out of the desert brush. "They weren't just following me," he later said in a police report. "They were hunting me." By the time he reached the outskirts of town, His truck's engine sputtered and died. The lights floated directly in front of his windshield and then, just like that, they vanished. The truck started again without a problem, as if nothing had happened. But Daniel refused to ever drive that road at night again. Locals soon whispered that the lights had personalities. Some playful, some aggressive, and some purely evil. A young boy claimed he saw a glowing white orb hovering outside his bedroom window. Instead of fear, he felt calm, almost hypnotized. He walked toward the window, his tiny hands reaching out until his mother burst into the room and yanked him back. The orb blinked twice, then shot into the night sky like a comet. Others weren't so lucky. A hiker exploring the desert trails vanished without a trace in 1979. His last words, recorded on a cheap handheld cassette he always carried, were chilling. "The lights are here. They're surrounding me. Oh God, they're so bright." The tape ended there. His body was never found. For the people of Marfa, the desert was no longer just empty land. It was haunted ground, alive with forces no one could explain. By the 1980s, the Marfa Lights had gained national attention. Journalists, scientists, even government researchers arrived in the tiny Texas town, determined to explain the phenomenon once and for all. Some claimed it was nothing more than swamp gas, or the reflection of headlights from the nearby highway. But locals knew better. The lights had been reported decades before cars even existed in the region. In 1982, a team of university physicists set up cameras, telescopes, and sensitive electromagnetic detectors on a hill overlooking the desert. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The equipment remained silent. The desert was calm, but on the 4th night everything changed. At 20:37 a.m., a glowing orb appeared just above the ground, then another, and another. Within minutes, 5 lights were floating silently across the desert, weaving back and forth like dancers. The scientists scrambled, adjusting lenses and recording data. Yet every time they focused their equipment on one orb, it would vanish, only to reappear somewhere else. Then came the most disturbing moment. One of the researchers, a man named Dr. Ellis, left the observation point and began walking toward the lights with a radio in hand. His colleagues warned him to stop, but he didn't listen. The radio crackled as he spoke. "I'm about 200 feet away. They're brighter now. Almost blinding." His voice cut off with a burst of static. Moments later, the other researchers watched in horror as the lights closed in around him. They flickered, swirled, and then they were gone. Dr. Ellis was lying on the ground unconscious. When they reached him, his skin was ice cold, and his eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. He eventually recovered, but he couldn't remember what had happened. The only words he muttered over and over were, "They wanted me to follow." The official report never explained what the team saw that night. Instead, the incident was quietly buried in the archives. But locals whispered that Dr. Ellis was never the same again. He left the university. His hair turned white within a year, and he refused to ever speak about Marfa. The lights, it seemed, weren't just a natural phenomenon. They were intelligent, aware, and possibly dangerous. As investigators struggled to explain the lights, locals turned to something older than science: legends. The Apache tribes who once lived near Marfa had their own chilling explanation. Elders spoke of a battle fought long before settlers arrived. Warriors ambushed under the desert moon, their blood soaking into the sand. According to legend, the glowing orbs were the restless spirits of those killed in betrayal, doomed to wander the desert for eternity. One chilling tale told of a warrior chief who was struck down, his last words echoing through the canyon, "My spirit will rise in the fire of the night, and none will escape my gaze." Generations later, people began connecting the dots. The lights always appeared in the same area, where the ancient battle was said to have taken place. And then came the story of the widow of the desert. According to locals, in the late 1800s, a woman named Maria lived near the plains. Her husband never returned from a cattle drive. Believing he had been murdered by thieves, she lit a lantern and wandered the desert every night, searching for him. She never found him. Weeks later, her body was discovered collapsed in the sand, the lantern still clutched in her hand. Some believe the Marfa Lights are her eternal lantern, still searching, still glowing, still waiting. But others claim something darker. In 1991, a group of teenagers camping near the desert reported seeing a cluster of red orbs circling their tent. They laughed at first, thinking it was just a local prank. But soon the lights grew brighter, hotter, until the air felt like it was burning. One of the boys screamed as the lights surrounded him. His friends dragged him out of the circle, his shirt smoking as if it had been scorched. When asked what happened, the boy whispered through tears, "They weren't lights. They had faces, watching us, smiling." After that, people began to wonder if the Marfa Lights weren't just spirits of the past, but something far older, something that fed on fear, blood, and souls. The desert, it seemed, wasn't cursed by accident, it was alive, and the lights were its eyes. By the late 1990s, theories about the Marfa Lights took a new and terrifying turn. Paranormal enthusiasts weren't just calling them spirits anymore. They were calling them visitors. Alien researchers claimed the lights were not lanterns of the dead, but unidentified craft, cloaked in energy, studying the desert from above. The way the orbs darted, hovered, and vanished without a trace, it mirrored countless UFO sightings across the United States. One chilling night, a pilot flying over the Texas desert reported seeing 3 glowing spheres, keeping pace with his aircraft. He radioed air traffic control, panicked, swearing the objects weren't on his radar. The spheres followed him for 20 miles before vanishing straight up into the sky at impossible speed. But here's where it gets darker. Locals began noticing black SUVs parked along the highways near Marfa. Strange men in suits, speaking to no one, watching the desert through binoculars. Some said they were government agents. Others whispered the 3 words nobody wanted to believe: Men in Black. In 2003, a college group set up cameras to livestream the Marfa Lights. At midnight, 2 orbs appeared, flickering against the dark horizon. Viewers watched in awe as the orbs shifted into triangular formation, eerily similar to the Black Triangle UFOs reported worldwide. But just before the livestream peaked in views, the feed cut out. The next morning, the students claimed all their footage had been erased and their equipment had been confiscated by officials they couldn't identify. One of the students, years later, finally spoke about that night. His voice shook as he recalled, "It wasn't just lights. We saw something bigger in the sky, a shadow, massive. The lights were just parts of it, like eyes on a face too large to comprehend." From then on, the Marfa Lights weren't just folklore. They were part of a cover-up, a mystery tied to both the dead and the unknown. Were they ghosts? Were they aliens? Or something that blurred the line between the two? All anyone knew was this: those who got too close either disappeared or were never the same again. For more than a century, the Marfa Lights remained unexplained. Scientists failed. Paranormal hunters failed. Even the government, with all its resources, kept silent. But sometimes the truth doesn't reveal itself in laboratories or headlines. It reveals itself to those who never asked for it. In 2017, a local man named Jacob Ramirez was driving home late from work. He had lived in Marfa his whole life. He had seen the lights before. Distant, harmless. But that night they were waiting for him. 3 glowing orbs appeared in the middle of the road, forcing him to stop his truck. His headlights flickered and died. His phone went black. In the suffocating silence, the lights hovered closer, their glow filling the cab of his truck with blinding white fire. Jacob swore later that he didn't just see the lights. He heard them. A low humming, like a chorus of voices inside his skull. They weren't random, they were speaking. Not in English, not in Spanish, but in something older, something that bypassed words and went straight to the soul. He stumbled out of the truck, falling to his knees as the orbs surrounded him. And then, he saw it. The lights weren't separate at all. They were fragments. Pieces of something vast and hidden, a shape far too massive to belong to Earth. In that moment, Jacob understood the truth that generations had feared. The Marfa Lights weren't ghosts. They weren't aliens. They weren't even alive in the way we understand life. They were watchers, ancient, patient, and everywhere. The desert wasn't haunted. It was occupied. Jacob's truck was found the next morning, door open, engine running, but Jacob himself was never seen again. The only thing left behind was his phone, mysteriously powered back on with one video recorded. The footage was blurry, shaky, But for 7 seconds, it captured something that chills the soul, a blinding orb, splitting open into a black void, and a whisper in the background, "We'll see you." The screen cuts to static, and that, my friends, is why the Marfa Lights remain unsolved. They are not just a story, not just a mystery. They are a warning, a reminder that some things aren't meant to be understood, only feared. So the next time you find yourself on that lonely Texas highway and you see a glow on the horizon, don't stop. Don't stare. Because once the lights notice you, they never forget.